The massive doors of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber opened with a sound like thunder, rolling across distant mountains. Ambassador David Kane stepped through the entrance, his human footsteps echoing in a space so vast that entire cities could have fit within its walls. Above him, crystalline formations stretched toward a ceiling that disappeared into artificial starlight, while around him, the greatest gathering of alien minds in the known galaxy watched his every move. 347 species had sent representatives to witness this moment. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering that defied human understanding. Gravity flowed in gentle curves that allowed beings from different worlds to stand comfortably on surfaces that twisted and bent through dimensions. The air shimmered with translation fields that converted thoughts and sounds into forms that every species could comprehend. At the center of it all stood a single chair, clearly designed for a human form. Kane had expected chains, containment fields, or some form of restraint. Instead, he found only an elegant seat that seemed to be carved from a single piece of starlight-infused crystal. Human representative. A voice boomed from the elevated platform where the council's senior members sat in judgment. The speaker was Chancellor Vorth, a being whose crystalline body refracted light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. You stand before the Galactic Council to answer for your species' crimes against the established order. Kane settled into the chair with careful precision, his movements watched by hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and consciousness detection devices. He had trained for this moment for 30 years, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer scale of the power arrayed against him. Your species, Chancellor Vorth continued, has been observed developing weapons of planetary destruction without Council oversight. Your military forces have expanded beyond your authorized system boundaries. Most seriously, you have made contact with 17 non-Council species without proper authorization protocols. A murmur rippled through the assembled representatives. Kane could see delegates from the Crowan Empire, massive beings whose chitinous shells gleamed like black metal, clicking their mandibles in what he recognized as expressions of disgust. The floating energy forms of the Veltar collective pulsed with colors that indicated severe disapproval. Even the normally peaceful plant creatures of the Verdani clusters had shifted their photosynthetic panels to display warning patterns. Kane waited for the accusations to finish, counting heartbeats while studying the chamber's architecture. Every surface seemed designed to intimidate, to make the individual at the center feel small and powerless. The ceiling showed a real-time display of the galaxy itself, with billions of stars twinkling in the artificial sky above. Each point of light represented worlds under Council protection, systems under Council law, species under Council authority. It was meant to demonstrate the futility of resistance against such overwhelming power. The evidence is clear, announced General Thane of the Draconic Hegemony. His reptilian features twisted into what humans would recognize as a sneer. His species had evolved from apex predators, and every movement radiated controlled violence. Earth's military capabilities have exceeded all authorized limits. Their expansion into the Proxima and Wolf systems violates the Expansion Limitation Treaty. Their unauthorized contact with primitive species threatens the stability of our carefully maintained galactic order. More murmurs of agreement swept through the chamber. Kane noticed that some species seemed genuinely angry, while others appeared to be following established protocol. The difference was important, though he wasn't sure yet how he would use that information. Furthermore, General Thane continued, intelligence reports indicate that humanity has developed stealth technologies that exceed approved parameters. This represents a clear and present danger to galactic security. Kane stood slowly, the movement causing a ripple of attention throughout the massive chamber. Weapon systems that he couldn't see but could definitely feel locked onto his position. Energy fields that could disintegrate him before he could complete a thought hummed to life around the edges of his perception. Honored Council, Kane said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Chancellor Vorth's crystalline form flared with what Kane's briefings had taught him was amusement. Explain yourself, human. What misunderstanding could possibly justify violations of 17 different galactic treaties? Kane smiled, and the expression seemed to confuse several of the alien observers. Humans, according to their files, typically showed fear or aggression when confronted with overwhelming force. Calm amusement was not a documented response pattern. The misunderstanding, Chancellor, is about which species is actually on trial here. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of translation systems seemed to pause as every consciousness in the vast space focused on the human representative. "I'm sorry," General Thane said, his voice carrying dangerous undertones. "Did you just suggest that the Galactic Council is on trial?"
Kane's smile widened slightly.
"Not the entire council, General. Just the intelligence-gathering portions of your organization." He gestured toward the viewing ports that showed the space around the council station. Outside stars twinkled peacefully in the void, and the normal traffic of galactic civilization moved in orderly patterns between the massive orbital platforms that housed the galaxy's government. "Tell me," Kane said conversationally, "how many ships did your sensors detect when my vessel arrived?" Chancellor Vorth's light patterns shifted to indicate mild confusion. "Your diplomatic transport and its escort squadron. 4 vessels total, all within acceptable parameters for a species of your technological level." Kane nodded thoughtfully. "And how many ships do your sensors detect now?" The question seemed simple enough that several council members began to answer simultaneously, but their words died as the chamber's display systems activated. External sensor readings appeared in the air above the assembled delegates, showing the space around the council station in perfect detail. The readings showed exactly what they had shown before: Kane's transport vessel and its 3 escorts, along with normal galactic traffic moving through established shipping lanes. "I see the same 4 vessels," Chancellor Vorth said, though his tone had become more cautious. "Look again," Kane suggested, and something in his voice made every being in the chamber focus their attention on the sensor displays with new intensity. For several seconds, nothing changed. The displays showed empty space, scattered starlight, and the familiar patterns of routine space traffic. Then, as if reality itself was adjusting its focus, the displays began to show something different. Ships materialized out of nothing, first dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They appeared in perfect formation around the council station, their hulls reflecting technologies that made the most advanced council vessels look like primitive chemical rockets. The largest ship, a kilometer-long vessel that seemed to bend space around itself, positioned itself directly in front of the main viewing portal. Its hull bore markings in ancient Earth script that even the translation system struggled to process. Terra's voice. The silence in the chamber was so complete that Kane could hear his own heartbeat echoing off the crystalline walls. "The Terran Federation sends its greetings," Kane said quietly, "and wishes to discuss the terms of your surrender." General Thane's reptilian features had gone completely pale. "Impossible. Our sensors would have detected such a massive fleet." Kane shook his head gently. "General, your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. The question you should be asking is not how we hid our ships from you." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the assembled representatives like a physical force. "The question you should be asking is how long we've been hiding them, and what else we've hidden that you haven't found yet." As emergency alarms began to sound throughout the council station, and frantic communications flooded the command centers of every member species, Kane remained seated in his crystal chair, waiting patiently for the galaxy's most powerful government to realize that they had just declared war on a civilization that had been preparing for this moment for far longer than anyone could have imagined. The trial was about to begin, but the defendants were not who anyone had expected them to be. The emergency session convened 8 hours after David Kane's revelation had shattered every assumption the Galactic Council held about human capabilities. In a secured briefing chamber deep within the council station, military leaders from 12 different species gathered around a holographic display that showed the impossible truth they were struggling to accept. Admiral Kess of the Aquarian States floated in her specialized life support pod, her tentacle-like appendages moving in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Her species had evolved in the deepest ocean trenches of their homeworld, and their military doctrine emphasized patience and careful observation. Finding out that they had been observed for decades without knowing it violated every principle of their strategic thinking. "Explain to me again," Admiral Kess said, her voice carrying the wet undertones of her aquatic nature, "how an entire fleet appeared in our most secure space without triggering a single detection system." General Thane paced the chamber's perimeter, his clawed feet leaving scratches in the reinforced flooring. The draconic hegemony prided itself on having the most advanced military technology in the galaxy, but their instruments had been just as blind to the human presence as everyone else's. "It's not just stealth technology," General Thane said, his voice carrying the controlled fury of a predator that had discovered it was actually prey. "Stealth implies hiding something that exists. These ships appeared from nothing. Our quantum sensors should have detected the gravitational disturbances caused by objects that massive. Unless," came a new voice from the chamber's entrance, "you were looking for the wrong kind of disturbances." The assembled military leaders turned to see a figure they didn't recognize entering their supposedly impenetrable briefing room. The woman wore a simple uniform without any insignia they could identify, and she moved with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. "I am Director Helen Cross of Terran Intelligence," she said, settling into a chair that materialized from the room's smart matter systems. "I thought it was time we had a proper conversation about what you've been missing." Admiral Kess's tentacles coiled defensively around her pod's support structure. "How did you penetrate our security?" "This chamber is protected by quantum encryption and psionic barriers." Director Cross smiled with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. "Admiral, you're thinking like a civilization that still believes in barriers. We stopped thinking that way about the same time your people discovered fire." She gestured, and the chamber's holographic display changed to show something that made every being in the room step back in shock. Instead of the expected star chart or tactical analysis, they were looking at a detailed schematic of the council station itself. But this wasn't just a blueprint. It was a real-time display showing the location and activity of every person on the massive structure. More disturbing still, nearly 30% of the figures on the display were marked with human identification codes. Each of those markers represents a human operative who has been living and working on this station, Director Cross explained casually, some for as long as 15 years. General Thane's voice came out as barely more than a growl. "Impossible. We conduct genetic screenings, psychological evaluations, background checks that go back generations." "You conduct those checks on the identities we provide," Cross corrected, "and we've gotten quite good at providing convincing identities over the past few centuries." The display zoomed in on specific sections of the station, revealing something even more shocking than human infiltration. Throughout the structure, key systems were highlighted in blue: power distribution networks, life support systems, communication arrays, defensive weaponry. "Every system marked in blue contains technology of human origin," Cross continued. "We didn't sneak aboard your station, General. We helped build it." Admiral Kess's breathing apparatus bubbled with distress. "That's impossible. This station was constructed using the most advanced council technology available." "Was it?" Cross asked. "Or was it constructed using technology that you believed was the most advanced available?" She activated another display, this one showing a timeline that stretched back over 2 centuries. Points along the timeline marked major technological breakthroughs in council civilization, advances in materials science, energy generation, computer processing, and space travel. The quantum computing revolution that tripled your calculation speeds in 2387. Human technology, licensed through the Centauri Trade Consortium. The crystalline hull materials that made your ships 30% more efficient in 2401, developed in human laboratories and introduced through intermediary species. The gravitational manipulation systems that allowed you to build structures like this station. We've been quietly providing the theoretical frameworks for decades. The implications struck the assembled leaders like a series of physical blows. Their entire technological civilization was built on foundations they hadn't realized were human in origin. "Why?" Admiral Kess whispered.
"Why help us develop while hiding your own capabilities?"
Director Cross's expression grew thoughtful. "Because we learned from history, Admiral. Every time a technologically superior species reveals itself to a less advanced civilization, one of two things happens. Either the advanced species conquers and dominates, or the less advanced species fights back and both civilizations destroy each other. We chose a third option. We let you think you were advancing naturally while we quietly guided that advancement in directions that would benefit everyone." General Thane's scales had shifted to deep red patterns that indicated barely controlled rage. "You manipulated our entire civilization." "We helped it," Cross replied firmly. "The technologies we shared prevented 3 galactic wars. stopped two ecological disasters, and allowed your civilizations to expand into space at a rate that would have been impossible otherwise. But yesterday, your council voted to eliminate humanity before we could become a threat. That vote ended our policy of hidden cooperation. The chamber's displays changed again, showing real-time feeds from across the galaxy. Every council homeworld, every major military installation, every significant trade hub was visible, and each was surrounded by human vessels that had apparently been there for years without being detected. "This is the Crowan Imperium's primary naval base," Cross said, highlighting one of the feeds. "Those 47 ships that you see in formation around your defensive perimeter, they've been there for 8 years. Another feed showed the Veltar Collective's energy harvesting stations. Your entire electrical grid depends on power distribution networks that include human-designed components. Components that respond to human control codes." Feed after feed revealed the same pattern. Humanity hadn't just hidden a fleet. They had hidden an entire civilization that had quietly integrated itself into every aspect of galactic society. "How many?" General Thane asked, his voice barely functional. "How many what? How many humans are there, really?" Director Cross paused, as if considering how much truth the assembled leaders could handle. "General, the human population you've been monitoring on Earth represents approximately 2% of our total civilization." The number hit the chamber like a detonation. If Earth's 8 billion humans were only 2% of the total, then humanity numbered in the hundreds of billions, spread across who knew how many worlds. "Where?" Admiral Kess managed to ask. "Where are they all?" "Everywhere," Cross replied simply. "In star systems you've marked as uninhabitable. In dimensional spaces you don't have the technology to detect. In mobile habitats that your sensors interpret as asteroids or space debris. We've been your neighbors for centuries. We've attended your universities, worked in your factories, served in your military forces, advised your governments. We've been the alien experts you consulted when you needed to understand other species' psychology." The final revelation was the most devastating of all. Not only had humanity been hiding their technological superiority, they had been actively participating in galactic civilization while studying every weakness, every dependency, every critical failure point in Council society. "What happens now?" Admiral Kess asked. Director Cross stood, and the neural suppression field that had been keeping the Council leaders calm suddenly released its hold. Several immediately reached for their communication devices only to find them completely dead. "Now you have a choice," Cross said, moving toward the chamber's exit. "You can accept that humanity is not the primitive species you believed us to be, and we can work together to build something better than what we've had. Or you can continue to view us as a threat that needs to be eliminated, and discover what happens when the species that's been quietly maintaining galactic civilization decides to stop being helpful." She paused at the door, turning back to face the assembled military leaders. "I should mention that every Council fleet is currently experiencing communication difficulties. Nothing permanent, just a temporary activation of the override systems we installed in your vessels over the past century." As Director Cross left the chamber, the Council's most powerful military leaders found themselves alone, with the terrifying realization that they had declared war on a civilization that had been keeping In the depths of the Council Station's historical archives, Archivist Talvin worked frantically through data cores that hadn't been accessed in over 200 years. The spider-like being's 8 limbs moved across control interfaces with desperate precision, while his cluster of optical sensors studied displays that showed information no one had bothered to examine for centuries. As the Council's senior xenological researcher, Talvin had personally supervised humanity's classification as a minor galactic civilization. His analysis had determined that humans represented a moderate expansion risk with limited technological development potential. Now, with human ships surrounding the station and evidence mounting that humanity had been operating throughout Council space for decades, he was searching for any clue that might explain how his assessment had been so catastrophically wrong. The first anomaly appeared in the trade records from 2298. A series of rare mineral transactions had been processed through the Altarian Trade Collective, involving elements that were supposedly only found in the Outer Rim territories. The transactions were notable because they involved materials that shouldn't have been available in the quantities being traded. Talvin's investigation was interrupted by a priority alert from the station's security center. 3 more humans had arrived, But unlike Director Cross's dramatic appearance in the military briefing chamber, these individuals had simply walked through the front entrance using valid diplomatic credentials. The main council chamber had been hastily converted into a crisis management center. Representatives from dozens of species clustered around communication stations, trying to coordinate responses to the situation unfolding across the galaxy. At the center of the chaos stood Chancellor Vorth, his crystalline form flickering with stress patterns that indicated near-system failure. "Chancellor," came a calm voice from the chamber's main entrance, "I believe it's time we discuss the actual scope of this situation." The assembled representatives turned to see three humans walking calmly into their most secure facility. The leader was a tall woman with silver hair who carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Behind her walked two companions, a man whose dark skin and quiet demeanor suggested military background, and a younger woman whose eyes seemed to catalog every detail of the chamber with scientific precision. "I am Admiral Patricia Stone of the Terran Space Command," the silver-haired woman announced. "These are Colonel Marcus Williams and Dr. Lisa Chen, our specialists in galactic affairs and xenobiology, respectively." Chancellor Vorth's light patterns shifted to deep amber, indicating severe confusion. "How did you enter this facility? Our security systems should have prevented any unauthorized access." Dr. Chen smiled with what appeared to be genuine amusement. "Chancellor, we've had authorized access to this facility since its construction began, Dr. Williams, and I have been attending council sessions as observers for the past 6 years. The statement sent ripples of shock through the assembled delegates. Several representatives began examining their colleagues with new suspicion, wondering how many of the beings they had worked alongside for years might actually be humans in disguise. "Impossible," declared Prime Minister Rax of the Centauri Coalition, his 6 arms gesturing in patterns that indicated absolute denial. "We conduct genetic verification protocols for all long-term personnel." Colonel Williams stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades working within the system he was now exposing. "Prime Minister, those genetic verification protocols were designed by the same research team that developed your current identity verification systems. Dr. Chen led that team." Dr. Chen nodded pleasantly. "The biological masking technology we developed allows human operatives to pass any genetic scan you're currently capable of performing. It's actually quite elegant. We don't disguise our DNA so much as we present it in ways your scanners interpret as belonging to known species." Admiral Stone activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with images the assembled representatives had never seen before. The display showed human colonies hidden within asteroid fields, massive construction projects concealed inside planetary rings, and manufacturing centers operating in the empty space between star systems. "What you're seeing represents 3 centuries of human expansion and development," Admiral Stone explained. "We haven't been hiding from galactic civilization so much as we've been hiding within it." The display shifted to show detailed scans of council facilities throughout the galaxy. Every major installation, every defensive position, every significant trade hub was revealed to contain human technology, human personnel, or both. The quantum communication network that allows instant communication across galactic distances, designed by human engineers and maintained by human technicians. The gravitational anchor systems that keep your space stations stable, human physics, implemented through what you believed were Altarian innovations. The defensive grid that protects council space from external threats. Those sensor arrays and weapons platforms have been staffed by human operators for over 50 years. Chancellor Vorth's form flickered more rapidly as the implications registered. "You're saying that our entire defensive capability depends on human cooperation?" "Not just your defensive capability," Dr. Chen replied. "Your entire civilization." She activated another display, this one showing the complex web of trade relationships, resource flows, and technological dependencies that kept galactic society functioning. Highlighted pathways showed how human-controlled operations provided critical components for everything from food production to starship construction. The hydroponic farming systems that feed the populations of 17 different species, based on agricultural technology developed in human research facilities. The medical synthesizers that produce medicines for biological forms we supposedly don't understand. Our xenobiology teams have been studying council species for 2 centuries. The entertainment networks that keep your populations content during long space voyages. 43% of the content is produced by humans working under assumed identities. Colonel Williams provided the most devastating revelation of all. The military exercises your fleets conduct to maintain readiness? Those scenarios are based on tactical simulations developed by human strategic analysts. We've been teaching you how to fight wars against enemies we know you'll never face, while ensuring you remain unprepared for threats you might actually encounter. Prime Minister Rax's complexion had shifted to the pale blue that indicated shock among his species. Why? Why infiltrate our civilization so completely? Admiral Stone's expression grew thoughtful. Because integration was preferable to domination, Prime Minister. When we first encountered galactic civilization, we had a choice. We could reveal our capabilities and risk being seen as a threat to be eliminated, or we could quietly become part of the existing system and help guide its development. We chose integration. Human scientists worked alongside alien researchers, sharing knowledge while learning about technologies we hadn't developed. Human engineers helped build the infrastructure that supports billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. Human artists contributed to the cultural renaissance that has defined the past 2 centuries of galactic development. We became part of your civilization while remaining true to our own. It was a partnership, even if you didn't know you were partners. Dr. Chen activated a final display that showed the council chamber itself in cross-section. Throughout the massive structure, critical systems were highlighted in blue. Life support, power distribution, communication networks, even the translation systems that allowed different species to understand each other. This facility, which represents the pinnacle of council engineering, couldn't function for more than 6 hours without human-designed technology. The atmospheric processors that create breathable environments for 47 different species, human atmospheric engineering, the artificial gravity systems that allow beings from different worlds to work together, human gravitational manipulation. Even the chair you're sitting in, Chancellor, was manufactured using human industrial techniques. The silence that followed was so complete that the background hum of the station system seemed unnaturally loud. Every representative in the chamber was beginning to understand that their entire way of life depended on the cooperation of the species they had voted to eliminate. What happens now? Chancellor Vorth asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Stone exchanged glances with her companions before answering. Now you have a choice, Chancellor. You can acknowledge the reality of human capabilities and work with us to build something better than what we've had, or you can continue to view us as a threat that needs to be eliminated. But understand this, the civilization you're threatening to destroy is the same civilization that's been keeping your own societies functioning for centuries. Remove human support from galactic infrastructure, and every council world faces system collapse within weeks. Colonel Williams added quietly, "We don't want to see that happen, Chancellor. We've spent 3 centuries helping build this civilization. We'd prefer to continue that work openly, as equals rather than hidden." The evacuation alarms that echoed through every council facility across the galaxy carried a desperate urgency that no one could ignore. On Centauri Prime, Admiral Kess watched in horror as her fleet's primary navigation systems displayed error messages in languages her computers couldn't translate. On Draconis Major, General Thane discovered that his fortress world's defensive grid had been operating under human control protocols for over 70 years. In the Council Station's Emergency Command Center, Chancellor Vorth stood before a holographic display that showed the scope of galactic infrastructure failure, spreading across inhabited space. What had begun as isolated system malfunctions was rapidly escalating into civilization-wide crisis. "Report," Vorth commanded, his crystalline form flickering with stress patterns that indicated near-catastrophic system overload. "Commander," Nash of the station security. Force, a massive being whose exoskeleton provided natural armor against most known weapons, consulted his tactical displays with movements that betrayed increasing desperation. "Chancellor, we've lost primary communication with 43% of Council facilities. Another 30% are reporting critical system failures in essential infrastructure. The pattern is consistent across all affected installations," Nash continued, his voice carrying the wet clicking sounds of his species' natural speech patterns. "Life support systems, power distribution networks, transportation controls, food production facilities. all experiencing coordinated malfunctions. Vorth's optical sensors focused on specific data streams that showed the failures weren't random. Every affected system contained components or software that had been classified as Council-developed technology, but which were now revealing themselves to be of human origin. "How long before we face complete system collapse?" Vorth asked. Nash consulted his projections with visible reluctance. "At current failure rates, critical infrastructure on major population centers will be compromised within 18 hours. Complete societal breakdown across Council space, perhaps 48 hours. A new voice cut through the tension in the command center like a blade through steel. "It doesn't have to come to that, Chancellor." The assembled Council leaders turned to see a human woman entering their most secure facility, as easily as if she were walking through an open door. Unlike the previous human representatives they had encountered, this woman wore no uniform, carried no obvious weapons, and moved with the calm confidence of someone who knew she was exactly where she belonged. "I am Captain Rachel Morgan of the Terran Diplomatic Corps," she announced, settling into a chair that materialized from the room's smart matter systems. "I'm here to discuss the terms of your surrender." Commander Nash reached for his sidearm but found his arm wouldn't respond to his commands. Around the chamber, other Council personnel discovered they were similarly paralyzed, able to speak and breathe but unable to make any aggressive movements. "Please don't be alarmed," Captain Morgan said, her tone suggesting genuine concern for their comfort. "The neural inhibitor field is purely precautionary. We've found that first contact situations can become unnecessarily violent when beings feel threatened." Chancellor Vorth managed to force words through his paralyzed vocal systems. How are you controlling our nervous systems?" Captain Morgan smiled with what appeared to be sympathy. "Chancellor, you're still thinking like a civilization that believes in biological barriers. We stopped making that distinction centuries ago." She gestured, and the chamber's displays changed to show something that made every consciousness in the room recoil in shock. Instead of the expected tactical information or star charts, they were looking at detailed biological schematics of every species represented in the chamber. Complete genetic maps, neurological pathway analysis, biochemical response patterns, psychological evaluation matrices, Captain Morgan explained casually. "We've been studying Council species for quite some time." The display zoomed in on specific sections that showed how various alien nervous systems could be influenced through targeted electromagnetic fields, pheromone releases, or direct neural interface techniques. It was like looking at an instruction manual for controlling every form of life in the galaxy. "Your scientists have been wondering how humans could develop such advanced technology so quickly," Captain Morgan continued. "The answer is that we didn't develop it quickly. We developed it slowly, carefully, and with extensive testing on willing volunteers from every species we've encountered." Commander Nash found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "You've been experimenting on us?" "We've been studying you," Captain Morgan corrected gently. "Medical research conducted with full informed consent from participants you never knew were human agents. Psychological analysis performed by researchers you believed were members of your own species. Technological development guided by engineers you trusted as colleagues. Every medical breakthrough that's improved quality of life for Council species over the past 2 centuries. Every technological innovation that's made interstellar civilization possible. Every cultural exchange that's prevented conflicts between incompatible species. Human research, human engineering, human diplomacy, implemented through what you believed were natural developments within your own civilizations." The display shifted to show real-time feeds from across the galaxy. On every Council world, human operatives were revealing themselves to local populations, explaining their true identities to beings who had worked alongside them for years, sometimes decades. "Dr. Veltash, your people's leading expert on quantum mechanics, human. Commander Zephyron, who designed your primary defense strategies, human. Even High Priest Mordan, who leads the spiritual guidance for 17 different species, human theologian with advanced degrees in comparative alien psychology." Chancellor Vorth's form had dimmed to barely visible levels. How many of the beings we've trusted, worked with, depended on?" Captain Morgan paused as if calculating exact figures. "In positions of significant authority, approximately 12% of all senior personnel across Council space. In technical and research positions, nearly 40%. In critical infrastructure maintenance, 68%. The numbers struck the chamber like physical blows. The Council hadn't just been infiltrated by human agents. They had been guided, supported, and effectively managed by human civilization for generations. The food you eat, processed by human agricultural specialists. The air you breathe, cleaned by human atmospheric engineers. The medicines that keep you healthy, developed by human researchers who understand your biology better than your own doctors do. The ships you travel in, designed by human naval architects. The homes you live in, built using human construction techniques. The entertainment that fills your leisure time created by human artists working under alien identities. Commander Nash forced out another question. Why infiltrate so completely? Captain Morgan's expression grew thoughtful. Because integration was safer than conquest, Commander. When we first encountered galactic civilization, we had several options. We could announce ourselves as a superior species and demand submission. We could remain hidden and develop in isolation. Or we could quietly become part of the existing system and help it grow into something better. We chose integration because it offered the best outcome for everyone involved. Your civilizations got access to technologies and insights that accelerated their development by centuries. Our civilization got to study and learn from dozens of different approaches to science, culture, and social organization. It was a partnership, even though you didn't know you were partners. The neural inhibitor field suddenly released its hold on the Council personnel, though none of them made any aggressive moves. The demonstration of human capabilities had made such gestures seem pointless. What happens now? Chancellor Vorth asked. Captain Morgan stood and moved toward the chamber's viewing portal, where the vast human fleet maintained its perfect formation around the Council station. Now you have a choice, Chancellor. You can acknowledge the reality of human integration into galactic civilization and work with us to make that partnership official. Or you can continue to view us as a threat that needs to be eliminated and discover what galactic civilization looks like when the species that's been maintaining it decides to withdraw their support. She activated one final display that showed the current status of critical systems across Council space: power grids, communication networks, transportation systems, food distribution chains, and all operating at gradually decreasing efficiency as human maintained. Components began shutting down according to preset protocols. Every human operative in Council spaces currently following withdrawal procedures. Captain Morgan explained. Essential life support systems will be maintained to prevent civilian casualties, but everything else will cease functioning over the next 24 hours. Unless, of course, you choose to acknowledge our partnership and work with us to build something better than what we've had. 23 hours after Captain Morgan's ultimatum, the Great Council chamber filled with representatives who had spent the previous day watching their entire civilization slowly collapse around them. Emergency reports from every Council world told the same story. Critical infrastructure failing, communication networks going dark, transportation systems shutting down, and essential services grinding to a halt as human support was systematically withdrawn. Chancellor Vorth stood at the central podium. His crystalline form dimmed to levels that indicated complete exhaustion. Around him, delegates from 47 species displayed the universal signs of defeat. Drooping postures, muted colorations, and the desperate energy of beings who had run out of options. The Galactic Council, Vorth began, his voice carrying through translation systems that were among the few pieces of technology still functioning normally, formally requests terms for peaceful resolution of our current crisis. The words tasted like acid in his throat, but the alternative was too catastrophic to contemplate. In the past day, 17 Council worlds had experienced complete power grid failures. Food distribution networks had collapsed on 12 major population centers. The quantum communication network that connected galactic civilization had been reduced to less than 30% capacity. Most devastating of all, the medical systems that kept billions of beings alive across hundreds of worlds were operating on emergency backup power that would last perhaps another 48 hours. We acknowledge, Vorth continued, each word a surrender of centuries of Council authority, that humanity possesses capabilities and integration into galactic society far beyond our previous understanding. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. The chamber's main display activated to show a human woman speaking from what appeared to be the bridge of one of the massive vessels that surrounded the Council. Station, Chancellor, said Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen, her tone carrying the authority of someone who spoke for an entire civilization. The Terran Federation appreciates your willingness to engage in diplomatic resolution. Admiral Chen's image was joined by those of other human representatives, scientists, engineers, diplomats, and military officers whose faces were now familiar to council members who had been working alongside them for years without knowing their true identities. Before we discuss terms, Admiral Chen continued, there's something you need to understand about what's been happening over the past day. The display changed to show real-time feeds from across the galaxy. But instead of the system failures and infrastructure collapse the Council expected to see, they were watching something unprecedented. Human operatives working openly alongside alien populations to maintain essential services. Dr. Morrison, whom you knew as Veltash the Centauri physicist, spent yesterday training local engineers to maintain the power grid on Centauri Prime, Admiral Chen explained. Commander Jackson, whom you knew as Zephyron the Draconic military strategist, is currently coordinating with General Thane's forces to ensure defensive systems remain operational. Throughout Council space, human operatives haven't withdrawn their support. They've revealed themselves and begun training local personnel to take over systems that have been human-maintained for decades. Feed after feed showed the same pattern. On every Council world, humans were working openly with local populations, sharing knowledge, explaining technologies, and ensuring that critical services continued operating, even as artificial dependencies were removed. Chancellor Vorth's optical sensors focused on the displays with growing confusion. You're helping us become independent of your support? Admiral Chen smiled with what appeared to be genuine warmth. Chancellor, the goal was never to make you dependent on us. The goal was to help galactic civilization develop to the point where such dependence was unnecessary. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, whom the Council had known as their leading xenobiological researcher for over a decade, joined the conversation from her position aboard another human vessel. The technologies we've shared, the systems we've maintained, the knowledge we've provided, all of it was designed to be transferable to local control when the time was right. Yesterday's system failures weren't punitive measures, Chancellor. They were graduation exercises. The implications struck the assembled representatives like a series of revelations. Humanity hadn't been secretly controlling galactic civilization. They had been secretly teaching it to control itself. Professor David Kim, the human they had known as their most trusted cultural advisor, provided additional context. Every human operative in Council space has spent years training local colleagues in essential skills. Every piece of human technology integrated into Council systems includes complete documentation for local maintenance and development. What you experienced yesterday wasn't the withdrawal of human support. It was the transition to local management of systems you're now capable of maintaining yourselves. Admiral Chen activated another display that showed the current status of infrastructure across Council space. Instead of the continued decline they expected, systems were stabilizing as local personnel successfully took control of previously human-managed operations. The Terran Federation has spent 3 centuries preparing galactic civilization for this moment, Admiral Chen explained. The moment when partnership could be based on equality rather than dependence. Every Council species now possesses the knowledge and capabilities necessary to maintain their own societies without external support. What happens next is entirely your choice. Chancellor Vorth found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What are you offering? Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. True partnership, Chancellor. Open cooperation between civilizations that understand and respect each other's capabilities. Shared research into technologies that could benefit everyone. Joint exploration of the galaxy's remaining mysteries. But most importantly, mutual defense against threats that no single civilization could face alone. The display changed to show something that made every being in the chamber step back in shock. Beyond the edge of known space, massive structures drifted in the void between galaxies. Artificial constructs so large they dwarfed entire star systems. The galaxy has neighbors, Chancellor, Admiral Chen explained quietly, entities that view biological life as a contamination to be cleansed. Artificial intelligences that consider organic consciousness inefficient. Extra-dimensional predators that see our universe as a hunting ground. Humanity has been preparing for their eventual arrival for centuries, but we've also been preparing galactic civilization to stand with us. When that time comes, feed after feed showed human vessels engaging with threats that Council sensors had never detected, robotic fleets from the galactic void, energy entities that consumed entire solar systems, and things that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. Every technological advancement we've shared, every defensive system we've helped you build, every alliance we've fostered between different species, all of it has been preparation for challenges that are coming whether we're ready or not. General Patricia Stone, whom the Council had known as their most effective military strategist, provided the final piece of the revelation. The war you declared on humanity yesterday would have weakened galactic defenses at the worst possible moment. Our long-range sensors indicate that we have perhaps 50 years before the first major incursion begins. 50 years to build a unified defense that can protect trillions of lives across hundreds of worlds. 50 years to combine the best of every civilization's knowledge and capabilities into something greater than any of us could achieve alone. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives began to understand the true scope of what they were being offered. Not conquest or domination, but genuine partnership in defending everything they had built against threats they couldn't even imagine. Chancellor Vorth spoke for every being in the chamber when he asked,
What do you need from us?
Admiral Chen's smile widened. What we've always needed, Chancellor. Cooperation, trust, and the willingness to work together despite our differences. The Terran Federation formally proposes the establishment of the Galactic Alliance, a partnership of equals dedicated to mutual defense, shared prosperity, and joint exploration of the universe's remaining mysteries. Every species maintains sovereignty over their own worlds and peoples. Every civilization contributes according to their capabilities and receives support according to their needs. Every decision that affects multiple species is made through genuine consensus, rather than imposed authority. Around the chamber, representatives began to straighten, their postures shifting from defeat to cautious hope. The humans weren't demanding surrender. They were offering something unprecedented in galactic history. Furthermore, Admiral Chen continued, all human operatives who have been working within Council space will reveal their true identities to their colleagues and offer to continue their work under official partnership agreements. The technologies that have been shared through intermediary sources will be provided directly, along with complete documentation for further development. The scientific research that has advanced galactic